This conference will now be recorded.
Very long day. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have made it clear that, yeah. The email did say, that's true. Next week, whatever you think. Whatever you think. Up to you guys. Yeah. We'll fill you in. Okay. So next week we will go back again to 9 days of Tisha B'Av, but this week let us return to our Shabbos. And the issue over here, page 217, the prohibition of selecting, which is borer. Okay, borer is one of the Lamitet Malachos, of course, that we went through, one of the 39 Malachot. And this is up there with Bishul, up there with cooking. This is certainly up there in terms of issues that come up on a practical level on Shabbos on, I would say, a weekly basis. Okay, so page 219, the malach of selecting borer. One has performed a prohibited method of selection if, number one separates the unwanted part of a food from the wanted part, right? Remember, we had our three requirements that made it okay, right? We'll come to that soon, I'm sure, yeah. So if you're taking out, so one of the requirements is the ochel mitoch hapsolet. You've got to be taking the good from the bad. Why? Why do we care? Why do we differentiate? The good from the bad is okay. The bad from the good is not okay. Why is that? What would you say, guys? How can we understand that? Okay. In other words, yes, what Esther's saying is along the right track. Esther said you're selecting the good to utilize the good, meaning we're allowed to eat on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Not only are we allowed to eat, it's a mitzvah to eat. What a great religion. It's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Can't beat that, right? So anything that is, as we've used the term before, derech achila, it's a manner of eating, that's good, that's fine. Anything that is more, let's call it industrial, commercial, right? Commercial preparation of food, so that we can't do on Shabbos, okay? If I'm separating the good from the bad, I'm taking what I want, and that's not going to be eating it. Whereas separating the bad from the good, right? Taking out the bad, then I'm left with the good. I'm not partaking of it. So that is going to be for more of an industrial, thank you very much, more of an industrial way of food preparation as opposed to simply food consumption, food eating. Number two, page 219, Gabriel. From a mixture of two kinds of objects, one separates the kind that is unwanted at the moment. Okay, so either it's the unwanted part of a food from the wanted part. Okay, for example, I'm cutting off the fat from the meat. Okay, or I've got a mixture of two kinds of objects. I've got my peas and carrots, and I like the carrots, I don't like the peas, right? So therefore, I'm separating the kind that is unwanted. Three, one sorts different kinds of objects or foods into groups of their own kind. Okay? So I'm not necessarily taking one, leaving the other. I am splitting up and making different groups of the different types of objects. Right. Okay? If one is performed a prohibited method of selection, if any of those types of selections. And now we're going to see examples. The malach of selecting comes up frequently on Shabbos while eating, washing dishes, arranging clothes, toys, and books, and therefore this must be studied and understood. Okay, 220. One may not separate the unwanted material from a food. Bones, seeds, other inedible parts of food are considered its unwanted material. Okay? So over there, we have the little pictures there, removing bones. Okay? So let's say you're cutting chicken for a child, right? So what you do is you would cut the meat off the bone, and right, in other words, you wouldn't be removing the bone, you'd be cutting off the meat from the bone, the part that you want, exactly. Well, yes, hands are certainly allowed. We'll soon see. Remember, we had this before. The three requirements for borer to be allowed are the good from the bad, right? Good. Miyad, biyad. Miyad means for immediate usage, and biyad means with your hand. We extend the hand to say that normal utensils are considered an extension of the hand, and that is fine, as opposed to using a sifter, right, or something that's more of a tool or a vessel to do the removal, right? So Danielle, certainly hands would be fine. Okay. And we discussed some different situations. Okay. Right. Over there, the young man, not the head of the table, but next to the father over there, he seems to be working on a piece of watermelon. Okay. We discussed watermelon, didn't we? Right. On one hand, you would say, like, knocking off the seeds, that's a problem. Why is that a problem? The bad from the good. However, there are those that say that is okay because that is your derech achila. That is your normal way of eating, right? So according to the first view, so you'd have to put the watermelon into your mouth and then discreetly get rid of the seeds, right? Or just swallow them, right? But either way, but it's also acceptable to remove the seeds as you're eating because, again, that is considered to be the derech achila. We also mentioned, let's say, a cantaloupe or honeydew, those type of melons. We said that's not going to be an issue. Why would that not be an issue? Not a mixture. Right? Each one is in its own clearly defined, whereas the pits of the watermelon are interspersed throughout, right? And the bones and the chicken here, you've got completely separate elements there. Okay, number 2 on page 221. From a mixture of two kinds, it is prohibited to separate the objects that one doesn't want from those that one wants. Okay, removing unwanted fruits or clothing. The prohibition applies even where the unwanted objects are fit for eating or any other use, and is only one that one does not want them at that particular moment. Right? The terms that we use for the good and the bad are ochel and pesolet. Ochel means food. Pesolet means waste. Right? So one might mistakenly think, oh, well, as long as they're both ochel, and I just want ochel A as opposed to ochel B, I want food item A instead of food item B, that's not going to be an issue because borer choosing is when there's ochel and pesolet. That's not the case. Whichever one you want gets categorized as ochel. Whatever you don't want is categorized as pesolet. So therefore, even though it's two food items, right, choosing, well, we'll have to see over here, because it needs to be a mixture, right, from a mixture of two kinds. Okay. Now, this comes up fairly often, that if you're about to bring out some grapes to the table for your guests for a nice, healthy dessert, right, and as happens at times, some of the grapes are a little bit bad, a little spoiled, a little, really not servable. So what do you want to do at that point? Well, what's your inclination? Pull off those bad ones, throw it out, and right, and bring out a proper bowl of grapes that doesn't contain these moldy ones. You would not be allowed to pull out the bad ones. That's classic. That's the bad from the good. You would need to pull off the good ones, right, and be left with whatever over there, and then right. So you need to be somewhat particular in the way that you're doing it.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
It's Rose.
Hi,
So,
Rose.
is this practice always, or is it only on Shabbat or high holidays?
Shabbat and Yom Tov.
Oh, only.
These only Shabbat and Yom Tov restrictions, and all of these help to completely transform that day into a completely different entity, completely different day. So it's only Shabbat and Yom Tov. It would not also apply on, let's say, Chol HaMoed, the intermediary days, the middle days of Sukkot, the middle days of Pesach. It's only on Shabbat and Yom Tov that these apply. On Yom Tov, we have some lessened restrictions, but that's basically in terms of carrying and in terms of cooking, right? Carrying and cooking are the two areas where on Yom Tov we have these diminished restrictions, but only Shabbat and Yom Tov for all these things. Yes. Okay. So yeah, again over here, right? In that little Okay. Now removing unwanted fruits and clothes. Okay. When it's children. Here's a little girl playing with her doll over here, right? We don't make a major issue of little kids when it comes to the somewhat complicated laws of Torah, right? They're playing, they're playing, and they want to dress their doll, and instead of pulling out the one that they want, they pull the one they don't. We chill out. Yeah.
So for that grape example, is that considered a mixture, or is it considered ochel and psolet?
That's ochel and psolet.
Okay, that's just what it is. It's not a mixture.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, because like a box of toys, like everything's mixed together, like that.
Yeah. No, this is also a mixture, meaning in different clusters you've got some that are good and some that are bad, right? So that would be considered to be a mixture. Yeah.
So it's okay to,
Correct. Yes. Okay. And page 222, it is forbidden to sort objects or foods into their respective groups. For example, sorting silverware into separate piles of spoons and forks, or sorting fruits, clothes, and toys into separate piles. Okay? Now, two things on that. So I think I might have mentioned when I was a teenager working with my brother, Lava Shalom, in a hotel, waiter, busboy, a great team, right? My brother's older than I. He was experienced. He was the waiter. I was the busboy. But it was a real lesson, because we would finish literally more than an hour earlier than all the other teams. We were all finished, ready to vacuum, not chops, ready to vacuum up the area, sweep up the area, right? When other people are still serving, right? Why? Because everyone else stood on ceremony. I'm the waiter, I should do that. I'm the busboy, I should do that. So everyone stood on ceremony. Each one did their own job, and then my brother and I, we worked together, right? So I helped him, he helped me, and we were out of there. Nice. Okay, Friday night. So I would bus off, right? And then they'd be washing the stuff in the kitchen. Most non-Jews are washing the stuff in the kitchen, right? And then we'd come back to us, right? And we had to get all of that silverware back into our station. We had all the silverware to set up for the next meal, right? So we'd come back kind of wet, and we'd kind of just shake it in a tablecloth. That's how we dry it off, right? So then how do we sort it out afterwards? Okay, right? You're not allowed to start. I can't start picking out all the knives, all the forks, all the spoons. So what we do is we kind of like just spread out, like spread a bunch out, right? And then they're no longer a mixture. Pick up a knife, that goes there. Pick up a fork, that goes there. Meaning, once I'm picking up one object, I can't like start picking out this, picking out that. If I'm picking out an object, I can put it into its proper place. I just recently saw, I'm not sure where I saw this, that you know, a person can fill the dishwasher, right? You don't have to put it into the sink. That's that where you want it to go. You also put it into the dishwasher, right? So when I'm putting things in the dishwasher, right? So then I can, right? I pick up a fork. I can put the fork in this. I pick up a knife. I can't sort out, but if I have something, I can put something into its group, into its place. Okay. And again, with kids, we don't make such a big deal out of this. It's important that they clean up, right? So, okay, let's look at 223. Only the permitted manner of selection, which we've done before, only when all three of the following conditions are present may one select food or other objects from a mixture. Okay, number one, ochel mitoch psolet, the good from the bad. The desired object has to be removed from the undesired objects and not vice versa. It is forbidden to do the opposite, to take away the unwanted food from the food one wants, or the undesired objects from the objects one wants. So 1 second, so how do you eat an egg? How do you eat a banana? How do you eat an orange? Derech achila, right? You know, so we're not going to say you've got to, you know, chomp on that whole egg and then, right? You know, do the watermelon pit move, right? That would be a good way to lose your appetite for a very long time, right? So that's derech achila. That's the normal way of eating. I'm not doing an act of selecting. I'm getting at the food. The only way to get to the edible part of the egg is by removing the peel, as it is by an orange, as it is by a banana. Okay. It is forbidden to the opposite, i.e. to take away the unwanted food from the food one wants, or the undesired objects. Okay. For example, it is forbidden to separate the bones from the meat or fish, or the pit from fruit when one is eating these foods. Rather, one must separate the meat or the fruit from the unwanted parts and leave the bones or pit on the plate. And this is how we have the Jewish food that is most commonly found in every kosher section of a supermarket is your bottles of gefilte fish. Gefilte fish. What does gefilte mean? Well, it's along those lines, right? Yeah, I'm not necessarily filtered, but yeah, right. It's similar to the French word of filet, F-I-L-L-E-T. Say in Yiddish, gefilte, as opposed to filet. I don't know, right? But basically, gefilte fish is fish that is ground up and made into patties, and then they're either baked or however it is, right? They sell it like in the jars over there, right? Some people prefer the flavoring. They sell logs also of it, of gefilte fish, and those I enjoy. Natalie just bakes those. Some people boil them, but Natalie, there we go. Thank you. Rose is doing some show and tell. Good. There you go. Okay. Thank you, Carol Merrill. Okay, I know I'm dating myself with that one also. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Rose. Right. So those are some people like to boil them. Now they just takes them literally as it is, puts them into a pan and bakes it. And it's absolutely delicious. Yeah. But the whole idea of that is when it comes to fish, right? Certain fish, it's so complicated it's almost impossible to eat it without first removing the bones, right? You don't want to put it in your mouth. It can be actually be dangerous. My kids are a kid in camp had something stuck, it's dangerous, right? So therefore, that's how the Jewish food of gefilte fish, right? It's interesting. A lot of Jewish foods, classic Jewish foods, come from halachic considerations. Gefilte fish comes from the halachic consideration of not being borer, not doing this malacha of prohibited separating on Shabbos. Okay, cholent comes from halachic considerations. What's that?
Against the Karaites.
Mm-hmm. Good. The Karaites who reject the oral teaching and take just the written Torah in a very literal fashion. So they would sit in a dark, cold house over Shabbat. Because it says, Lo tavaru eish, do not burn any fires in all of your dwelling places. That means do not ignite, do not extinguish, but you can utilize. On the contrary, if we were playing Pictionary and I wanted to get you to guess Shabbat, what's one of the things that I might draw? I wanted to draw something to represent Shabbat. Candles. Challah, wine cup, candles. Those would be the classic things. So on the contrary, the sages said, no, light Shabbos candles. Right? Why? Because that increases the Shabbat Kodesh, it increases the holiness, it increases the Shalom Bayit, the tranquility of the home, it increases the enjoyment, the glow of Shabbos, right? So they would eat cold food. Maybe they have hot food Friday night, and they turn off the fire before Shabbat begins, but by Shabbos day, they're all eating cold food. So we specifically have hot food Shabbos day. And the challenge is such that it gets put up before Shabbos and it continues cooking. And that's how we have our hot food on Shabbos to show that we follow the understandings of the sages, of the Torah Shebaal Peh, of the oral Torah transmitted to Moshe on Mount Sinai and passed down to us. That's another case of a halachic consideration that created a classic Jewish food. Matzah balls is another one, but that's pretty clear, right? That's Pesach that invented the need for matzah balls. What about cheesecake? So that's not such a halachic consideration. Okay. For example, so to separate the bones from the meat or fish, rather one must separate the meat or the fruit from the unwanted parts and leave the bones or pit on the plate. Similarly, any garment that is not needed at that moment may not be taken from a pile of clothes, right? If your clothing is still all mixed up in a hamper, you can pull out what you need, right? But you wouldn't pull out. You've got a lot of sweet little bodies to. Yeah. We had our 5 little boys, and they were all pretty close in age and pretty close in size. So when it came to like their socks and their underwear and their t-shirts, like, look, is this a 2-4 or a 4 sigma? It was ridiculous. Until now, they had this fantastic idea. We got these mesh bags. And each kid, when they got undressed, they would put their underwear into their mesh bag. And then we would wash everything in the mesh bag. And then dry it in the mesh bag. Yeah. Why did I wait so long to share this with you? Yeah. It made a very big difference. Yeah. You want to get the biggest size mesh bag so that things can move around in there, and it might mean doing laundry a little bit more often so it doesn't get too full, so it cleans well, but it's well worth it. This was in Israel when kids were small, but I'm sure Oh, yeah. Just go on Amazon, say Rabbi Ciner's mesh bags. I got a little subsidy on this side, a little cut. Okay. Number 2, the selecting must be done by hand and not with a special tool for separating like a sieve or a sifter. A spoon or fork, as they are normally used, are not considered special tools for separating. They're an extension of one's hands, and therefore that requirement of yad with the hand is also with one's utensils. So
That applies to like where you're using with the dinner plate, but what about like if you're like picking things down?
well also, yeah. No, all things that you would use your hand, but just not very palatable for yourself or others around you. So that would be considered all normal extension of one's hands. Though speaking of that, it's interesting. A slotted spoon, a spoon that has little drains out, right? So that you would not want to use that in order, let's say, if you want to get some vegetables out of the soup. That would be more like a tool than a normal spoon or fork. Okay, so that one would not use that. Okay, no, that would be borer. That's borer, right? You're selecting what you want from what you don't want, but that's using what's considered to be like a kli. Okay, so how about I want to wash off my grapes, right? So the grapes now, very often they come in a bag that you can just open the bag and rinse it off in the bag, and there are holes in the bag, and the water goes right through. Or let's say I want to put it into a colander, right, and wash it off over there. Good or no good? I'm gonna be the maverick over here. I'm gonna say it is good. Why do you say it is good? Why do you say it's okay? What would you say, Esther?
Say that there's no power.
I'm not separating anything. Now, if they are filthy, if there's all this sand over it, right? So then my rinsing it off is doing an act of borer, and I'm using that sifter, right? It wouldn't be a problem for me to take and just run under a faucet with my hands, but using that sifter would be a problem. But in the usual case where there's nothing visible, there's nothing on it. I mean, whatever. Until now, I do wash things off, right? But there's nothing tangible that I'm separating over here, right? So there, it just makes it easier to use that plate. So there, I'm not separating. It's not that I had a mixture of water and grapes, and now I'm putting it into a sifter, into a colander, and it's separating. There, I started off with grapes, and what am I ending up with? With grapes. So I'm not doing an act of separating. But the example that I gave would definitely be a problem, right? Using that slotted spoon in order to take the vegetables out of the soup, right? And not have, and right, so there, that I'm separating. I've got a mixture of soup and vegetables, and now I'm using this vessel, this kli, to do the separation. That is a problem. Yeah. Rinsing off is fine. I don't even know if you have to come on to derech achila, right? Because I'm not really separating anything of any substance. Yeah, when I'm doing an act of borer, then we might say in certain situations derech achila makes it okay, right? But again, borer is separating two different things. By the grapes rinsing it off, I'm not separating anything. I'm washing it off.
You couldn't peel off the grape skin and say that Because there are people who peel off grapes before they eat the grape.
Look, if that's how you, if that's how you want to eat, look, let's there's certain things that some people eat the skin, some people don't. Cucumbers, right? Some people will peel the cucumbers, others will just, right? So yeah, so there one would be able to, right? If that's how I want to eat my cucumbers, I could peel it, right? Probably not using a peeler, better to use a knife, or maybe in our Rabbi book, right? About using a peeler. I'm sure there can be two opinions on that, right? Is that considered to be a spoon, knife, fork, or is that considered to be a sifter, right? I'm sure that we have two different opinions on that. But if you want to peel your grapes with your hands, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you lose a lot in the process. Yeah. Especially the ones that get husband choice. Yeah. We never peel those. We just, yeah. The bigger, I think they call them like those American cucumbers. Those are a little more bitter. Yeah. But the Persian ones are delicious. Yeah. Now, let's say you have like a coleslaw, right? Which is the cabbage, and it has some juice. So there are going to be different opinions about using a slotted spoon, right? Because there I'm not really doing an act of separation. Meaning, when I use that slotted spoon for the soup, I'm left with no soup and only vegetables. When I use it for the coleslaw, there I'm not doing it to, I'm left with a good amount of the juice and of the cabbage, right? But probably best even there not to use it. Okay, last divya, the selecting may be done if the item is needed for immediate use. Okay, so this is important, right? This comes up, Linda, with the Shabbos mashgiach and the preparations for Kiddush, right? That anything that would be considered separating, that's being done, the good from the bad, and everything being done properly, but we don't want to do it. You wouldn't do it before you go to shul for the meal when you come home. Okay, you want to do it, right? It doesn't need to be this, right? It could be right before the meal. That's considered also for miyad, immediate usage. It doesn't need to be this second and then, you hit the timer, with the 10-second rule to get it into your mouth, right? But it would not be done in advance of far in advance of the meal. Sledding may be done if the item is needed for immediate use. Food may be sledded if it will be eaten right away, and clothes if they'll be worn right away. They may not be sledded if they are to be eaten or worn later in the day. Okay, so preparing an outfit, right, for the next morning, right. So there, right, one would not be start pulling out. If it's again, if it's in a mixture. If it's in the drawer where it is, that's not an act of it's hamper. Right? That's where you run into trouble. Okay. If the next day is Shabbos, it's okay. Meaning Friday night, preparing for Shabbos morning, that's not a problem. On Shabbos, preparing for after Shabbos, that's a problem. Correct. Mm-hmm.
What about like folding the bed or like throwing clothes?
Okay. Right? The clothing in the hamper. So I'm not going to wash that until sometime during the week. So is that preparing for the week? Or let's take another example, right? When I'm clearing off the table, right? And I'm not going to be eating these items again until the next week, until sometime during the week, right? So it's not considered hachana. Well, there are two factors. Number one, it's not considered hachana, preparing for after Shabbos, if I'm just finishing up this act, right? Meaning, when I'm getting undressed, part of finishing up the act is putting the clothing into the hamper, right? That's just part of the process, right? When I clean up the table, I don't leave everything on the kitchen table or on the counter. I put it where it's supposed to go, right? Even though I'm not going to use it again until during the week, but that's not an act of preparing. That is finishing out my Shabbos activity, okay? And right, and you know, we mentioned how one can brush one's teeth on Shabbos without compromising any halacha, right? How about rinsing off the toothbrush afterwards, right? So, right, is rinsing off the toothbrush, right? Is it only allowed at night because I'll use it again the next morning, so that's okay? But when I rinse, but in the morning when I brush my teeth, I can't rinse it again because that's for after Shabbos? No, because part of the steps that you do with your teeth care, right, is you're going to floss, you're going to brush, you're going to rinse off the brush, you're going to put it back where it goes. The same way that putting it back where it goes isn't hachana. That's just putting something back. Okay. Now, when it comes to, there's another factor which will help, and that is, am I doing this for my oneg Shabbos, for my enjoyment of Shabbos? Okay, let's say I'm eating on Friday night and I go to Beth Jacob of Irvine. So Shabbos afternoon, I eat in shul. Shabbos Shudas, I eat in shul. So I'm not going to need this table again until after. I'm not going to need it again on Shabbos. So why am I allowed to clean off Friday night? Why don't I have to leave everything, all the plates and silverware and cups and crumbs and what have you, right? Why don't I have to leave it on the table? Otherwise, I'm preparing for after Shabbos. No. As the Darrell said, Oneg Shabbos, right? It will detract from my Shabbos if I'm going to be walking around and the table's a mess. I want the place to look nice. I want the place to look clean, orderly, Shabbosdik, right? In a nice Shabbos atmosphere, right? So coming back to the question you made about making the bed, right? So if it bothers you that, you know, that the beds are a mess, right? So then one could and would straighten the bed on Shabbos. If one doesn't really care if the bed's a mess, but you know, I like to go to sleep in a nicely made bed, right? So then I'm not doing it for Kavod Shabbos. I'm doing it because I'd rather do it now instead of tonight when I'm ready to get into bed, right? So then it would be a problem. So the question really is, one needs to know oneself, am I doing this for my own Shabbos, or am I doing this to save time Saturday night? All right? Okay. Going to 224, the permitted manner of selecting an object from a mixture. Thus, one may select items of a mixture only if all three conditions are fulfilled, right? The wanted is separated from the unwanted. Separation is done by hand. The object is needed for immediate use. Okay? Yes.
I'm not sure if this applies to someone mentioned like if you have something like a thread or something like unwanted, obviously with a stain it's different. You wouldn't wet it or anything because that's laundering.
Correct.
But if you had like a thread or something, like a string or something, and it's not connected, so if you pull it off, it's just a standalone string. Is that a mixture?
That's not a mixture.
Right? Okay.
That's not a mixture.
Okay.
That's something sitting on your, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Summary 225, selecting, separating two coins that are mixed together, right? That's the key here. The block selecting is permissible only when all three conditions exist. It is done by hand, the wanted from the unwanted, immediate use. And he has a nice little diagram here. Okay, by hand, right? Separating unwanted, immediate use permitted. Otherwise, everything else, unless you have those three conditions, everything gets pushed off to the right-hand side over there, which is prohibited. Okay? Using a tool as a non-starter. Okay, that we know. A fly that falls into a drink. Waiter, there is a fly in my drink. If a fly or any other unwanted object falls into a drink or food, it should not be removed alone, but should be taken out together with a little of the drink or food and only then thrown away. So that's an interesting concept. Okay? All right, that's an interesting concept. What am I gaining from taking it out with some of the drink? Why is that better? So the guy over there, the curly hair, pulling out the fly. No. The guy over there with the straighter hair, with the spoon and the fly and the water going onto the floor, right? That is okay. What's the difference?
It's because part of the drink is not a mixture, so part of the drink.
Yes, good, Yoshi. Right? I didn't really, another example, which I don't think we would have over here, but is brought elsewhere. Let's say I have a piece of meat, and there's a piece of fat, there's a thing of fat on the side, right? So I can't just cut off the fat. I can cut the meat and eat. I can't cut and remove the fat. Let's say I find it a little bit unpleasant having that on my plate. So what would be a way I could cut off the meat and get a different plate? Or if I cut not in between the meat and the fat, but I cut with a little bit of meat along the fat, or a little bit of fat along the meat. So then what am I doing? I'm cutting the meat. I'm cutting the fat. So I'm not really doing an act of separating between the meat and the fat, because when I finish, there's still going to be a meat and fat mixture, right? So that's a similar idea over here, right? I haven't separated the fly. I scooped out some drink that had, so I separated within the drink, from the drink, and there happened to be a fly, right? Anytime I take any of the drink out, the fly is going to be in one or the other, right? It's not going to, regenerate itself, and right. So that's the idea over here in doing this. Exactly what you said.
Yeah. So we kind of
Yeah.
It's like measure.
You want to have a little bit along with it. Filtering drinks, 227. One may not filter or strain unwanted matter from liquors by means of a sieve or a piece of cloth, right? Yeah, certainly that's going to be an issue, right? Because, over there, removing the bad from the good, and I'm using a kli, right? So there are two strikes against me. One may slowly pour liquid from a vessel, even if one's purpose is for the unwanted matter to remain behind in the vessel. Why? Right? That's the right. That's the diagram, the illustration to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that okay? Okay, I'm not using a tool. I'm not even doing an act of separating. What am I doing? I'm pouring, right? I'm pouring from one vessel to another. Now, and I'm also not doing a full act of separating, because there's liquid that's left in with those unwanted material. Now, one must take care to stop pouring as soon as the flow stops and only drops are coming out, because then already I'm doing a real act of separating, since this is considered separating the unwanted from the wanted, which is forbidden. Okay. Separating by means of water. Let's see if they're going to agree with what I said or not. One may not separate unwanted matter mixed with fruit or any other food by means of water. Okay? Okay. So that is like the example that I gave, when you've got some sand or dirt mixed onto your grapes or berries, right? That's going to be an issue. One may not pour water on food mixed with unwanted matter so that the unwanted matter will float or sink and thus be easier to remove. It is advisable to rinse fruits before Shabbos, since some authorities consider rinsing under a faucet as selecting. Okay? Though I said before that's not really going to be an issue because you're not really, I would say the normative halacha is that that's not going to be an issue because there's nothing tangible that is being separated, that's being selected. Yeah. Yes, 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 but it's good to know what you need to do and what you don't need to do. And it's not worth, right? Did you wash before Shabbos? Going to Shabbos, nice, sweet, relaxed, right? And if that means not washing the food before Shabbos, right? Then don't wash before Shabbos. Okay? Yeah, yeah. We have to know the balance over here.
What about preparing salad? Wash salad.
Say it again.
Preparing salad on Shabbos. You can, leave the lettuce.
Okay, so if you have to start checking it for bugs, that's a problem.
Okay.
Because that's already getting into serious psolet mina ochel. You're taking it, right? But if you're talking about just rinsing off things, right, just for hygiene, whatever, pesticides, whatever, right? Again, that's not going to be a problem. Actually see note number 1 in the bottom there, 228. In the case that the unwanted matter is so minute that most people would eat the food without washing it first, see Mishnah Berurah Bir Halacha, that's going to be far less of an issue. And that's really the case, rinsing things off. Peeling. One should not peel or shell fruits, vegetables, nuts for later use. They may be peeled, shelled only for immediate use, right? And take a look on the bottom there, peeling immediately before the meal permitted, right? Again, immediate use does not mean necessarily, right, to be put into my mouth immediately, but it means for the meal that's going to be eaten, right? Right now preparing for the meal, as opposed to, again, doing this before Shabbos doing this before going to shul Shabbos morning in order to have it for the meal. That already would be an issue.
I could peel a hard-boiled egg on Shabbos if I wanted to.
Yes, but you wouldn't peel your hard-boiled eggs Shabbos morning before you go to shul to have it ready for you when you come back. Okay? As an insult to the chef? Leftover foods. Look, I think people often, now that I think a lot of, I don't say the women, I'm misogynistic. Whoever's preparing the food for Shabbos, right, normally wants to make sure that there'll be, no one likes when, there's nothing left on the serving plate. Maybe a guest wants a little bit more. So we always invariably end up overcooking. And that way you have, there's a Hasidic concept to have the Rebbe's Tish. right? Tish is Yiddish for table. So you have the chassan's tish, the groom's table, right before the wedding. So the Rebbe's tish, Hasidim on Friday night, they all get together with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe will make brachas, and everyone will have a little bit of idea that you're getting food that the Rebbe made a bracha on. That elevates the food, and that way, right? So like this, this is food is made for Shabbos. It's elevated food. It wasn't all eaten. When we have guests Friday night, we end up eating a good amount of that food. A good amount of the weekday meals. Tonight for dinner, I had a lot of that chicken soup for Friday night. That was the end of it. Yeah. I understand that. So will it be a problem to prepare more food on Friday?
Yeah.
There's never a problem preparing food on Friday. Yeah, as much as you like. Yeah, and have it during the week.
What's the latest time on a Friday afternoon that the public check there?
Usually we check the Erev on Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday. If it is down, then we sometimes have an issue getting the guy to come. Sometimes he says, I'll be there Friday afternoon by this and this time. He's so reliable. So we'll have to actually eyeball it and make sure that he actually did fix it properly. So usually if everything's fine, the email goes out Friday morning about 11 o'clock. But it's when we're having some issues, that's when things get, no pun intended, down to the wire. So, okay, on that note, I'll be here all week. Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Good night, good night. Good seeing you. What they say, good seeing you, Rose.
Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, Rose.
Good night.
Sure.